Welcome to Reinvention Revisited, and this is where we meet brilliant people who've either changed direction or followed their passion or turned a life twist into something new. And today's guest is Dr. John Taylor. I don't think I've ever called you that before my whole life. So this is a mate that I know as JT, and he's a dedicated local vet, and he's got over 2 decades of experience. He's a successful business owner as well, the founder of Taylor Vets. And without embarrassing him too much, he's somebody that I've always admired for his determination, especially in endurance events that we've been a part of. I don't know how he does it, but he seems to have a different pain threshold to many of us. But also admire his business acumen as well. So JT, thank you very much for being a guest and welcome to the Reinvention Rooms.
Pleasure, Charlie.
So obviously you're a vet, and I don't think I've ever called you doctor before in my whole life. But can
Mm.
you give a bit of backstory into how did Taylor Vets, how did that come about? What's the history of your practice?
So I met my wife actually at the boat club that kind of we met at as well, and we ended up setting up a practice in 2005, in the heady days of cheap money and 110% mortgages. So I think essentially I was unemployable at the time. I was, someone said to me, you're such a bubble worker, Taylor. Well, that's kind of why I've had to set up my own place because I'm the
I,
only person that will tolerate me.
I know many business
Um,
owners that say the same thing, or other people have said it about them.
well, I know you have an idea of the way that you want things the way that you want things to go, and so yeah, I mean, it was. I suppose I was 5 years qualified at the time, which is a little bit. The traditional path at the time was to join a practice, become a junior partner, become a senior partner. I did have a word with the practice that I was working at the time. They said they neither needed the money nor the expertise. So I was kind of stuck, really. I think actually, if they've had a different response, maybe my life would look very different. And it's something that stayed with me actually through the rest of my career. That new crop, the new people coming through, providing them with opportunities. I have a theory which is, the job of anybody is actually to get a better job.
Mm.
And my job as a boss is to try and provide people with the best job that they can. It's like an arms race with the competition.
Yeah. I
So
remember
yeah, so
that reminds me, my dad always used to tell me, his mantra was employ people who are better than you or have the potential to be better
mm,
than you. And I always remember that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we started up. We went through. I got to a stage where I felt the practice because there was four of us at the time. No one wanted to come into partnership with me at the time, and I felt that the place was getting really vulnerable. And then I had young children like yourself at the time, and I thought, wow, something happens to me, this place will go under. Uh, so coincidentally, a friend of mine bought a practice off somebody who they'd actually had to have their arm amputated after getting septicemia from an infected cat bite.
Sure.
Uh, and they picked it up at a tenth of its value. And so we sold to one of these corporates that was sniffing around at the time.
Mm.
And this is something else that I've learned over the years is I think I've got a pretty fixed set of things that I want to do and ethics and culture, and it just wasn't matching. So I left pretty quickly within a couple of years. Tried to become an external consultant to turn things around. We still weren't aligning at all. Um, Redundancy started kicking in from this corporate. I felt like I needed to do something to provide other people with the same opportunities that I had when uh,
Mm.
when I started off 20 years ago. So I felt like a real strong. I felt it was my moral imperative, if that doesn't sound too highfalutin. Yeah, I
No.
felt like I needed to do something to give back to them. And so that's when we started over here in Brackley. The place has just grown exponentially. We've just moved to another site. We've opened another site as well. And yeah, it seems to be going really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where do you think that sort of values driven way of running a business has come from?
uh, I mean, I didn't have, when we started off in 2005, I didn't have no formal leadership training, formal business training, really. I mean, I barely knew what that was. And over the years, I sort of failed at a lot of things. I failed at a lot of people management, and over time, I've stumbled towards solutions. Perhaps if I'd just picked a couple of books up or done a course, I would have got to a lot more quickly. I started a mentorship course in business probably around early 2013, 14, that sort of time. Um, and that turned things around. And I suddenly realized that I'd stumbled into, I had my way of doing things, and, service and welfare and all those sort
Mm,
of things are at the core of everything that we did. Um, but I didn't realize how I could communicate that, how core that was to the team, really.
mm,
Um, so I did that. I did it was sort of yeah, a mentor, it was a mentorship program. We then sold. I went into fixing practices from the outside, which meant I really needed to earn my spurs. And I did a lot of courses, read a lot of books, talked to a lot of people. Um, and then actually, when I was opening this place, at the same time as opening this place, I enrolled in an MBA as well.
mm.
So I'm most of the way through an MBA at the moment. And the course material is great. It's really, and the bibliographies that they give you are really interesting. But just being around other people who are in leadership roles, and everyone has the same kind of problems, I think. And
Yeah.
so it's been really interesting to get other people's takes on situations, because it's hard work doing it yourself. You have to
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel every single time.
Yeah. But were you quite okay, comfortable with risk? Because, as you say, you made the decision to set up your own practice. There are other people that might have the same idea, but they're held back by something. It might be,
Mm.
that they're highly experienced people that sometimes I'm surprised that they're holding themselves back from doing something because they're worried to take that risk. What was your appetite for
Um, well, I used to own racehorses. No, I
it?
mean, I think risk is a funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Risk is a perceptual thing. It's not there is a real risk, a real rate at which something will happen, which is often really, really difficult to work out. And so we fail over to the easier way of, what does this feel like? And often we overstate risks which are really vanishingly small, and we understate risks which are really obvious. So actually, in my professional life, I often have to talk about risk management. And if I say something to you, this is going to happen 1 in 1,000 times, a lot of people go, "Oh, that's." But then if I said to you, your overall risk of dying this year is 1 in 100,
Mm.
it's quite a hard. I don't think maths really helps. It doesn't give you that feeling of what the
Yeah.
risk is.
Yeah.
And so we talk an awful lot about this. And I'll say the risk of doing this procedure is that, and the risk of doing this is that. But there is a risk of not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
That is the default risk, I suppose. And that risk is often, I can't remember, was it Kahneman in prospect theory? We fear loss, and we overvalue that feeling of loss and undervalue the feeling of gain. But what you have may be risky, but you cling on to it.
Yeah.
And so I think it was an old mentor who once said to me that, yes, it sounds risky having your own business, but you're the last person who gets made redundant.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think employment is often, it's a screen for something else. You don't realize just how thin the ice is that you're standing on sometimes.
Yeah. And
Um,
probably even now more so in today's market
yeah,
that a permanent position is not as safe as it used to be.
no,
Yeah.
no. And I think businesses have to be competitive. They have to make sure that they are providing a safe environment and a profitable environment for the other people that are in the business. And if people aren't quite performing, aren't quite right, or there's too many of them, then I can kind of understand it. I don't think it's managed very well, and perhaps sometimes it's used unethically. But businesses have to survive as well. The bosses have a responsibility to the wider team, I think, sometimes. So to those people that I would say who are worried about risk, I'd say actually, if you are worried about the risk of taking the steps, take try to understand what the real risk is, but also realize that psychological trick that you have, that you will be underestimating the risk that you are currently taking because you're kind of comfortable with it.
Mm.
But it's not something that perhaps you've really looked at.
Yeah.
So I think my attitude to risk is actually, life's a risk. And actually, I think what I don't want to do is lie on my deathbed thinking, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done that. I think there was that book, like the 20 biggest regrets of the dying, and
Yeah.
that is one of them.
Yeah.
My father on his deathbed actually said to me he wished he'd, taken more risks over the years and not been so what's up? I mean, ultimately, I do feel it. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
like
You're not a
I'm not a
robot.
robot when
Yeah.
it comes to risk. I do
Yeah.
get stressed.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
get stressed when you're starting off and you see you're burning through the cash at a rate of
Yeah.
knots, and you see the bank balance coming down, and you think, I'm just hoping this is going to pull up at
Yeah.
some point. I had a full head of hair when I started this.
No, you didn't.
Um, reasonable. And so, yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
do feel it, but so you have to develop coping strategies. And my coping strategy is being happy with the scenario that we lose it all. We go
Mm.
bankrupt. We go bankrupt. That's fine. I'll try my hardest. But if we go bankrupt, it's not like I'm losing an arm or a leg, or a close family member's dying, or
Yeah.
someone gets a terrible problem. It's bankruptcy. It's buildable from. And I think,
Yeah.
I think one thing that the Americans do is they realize that entrepreneurs, they celebrate, the only people who are
Yes.
failing are the people who are trying. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that cultural acceptance of, fail, pick yourself up, move
Yeah.
on again. I think that's something that we perhaps could learn from a little bit
Yeah. No,
sometime.
agree. What have you learned though? Because it does feel as if, and you see it in other people that set up businesses, that they find a bit of a blueprint. It almost,
Mm,
they go with the first one, they learn with a bit of trial and error, and they get to a point where
mm.
they go, yeah, that seems to be a formula, and then they go again, and it might be another business or another part of the business or something new. What do you feel that you've learned in setting up from the first practice and setting up the second practice? What
Mm.
that's really helped you? That would be useful for
Um,
for others who are looking to do a similar thing.
mm. I think an acceptance that life and the environment is just completely chaotic, and it's almost impossible to predict. I mean, I can't predict what my kids are going to do, never mind predict what the business is going to be like in a year or two's time.
Mm.
I'm a big believer in sort of evolutionary business. So this idea of trying things continually. I think if you have a business philosophy, which is we set up a system, we keep it perfect and we regulate that, that's an incredibly brittle system. One tax change or one particular change in your customer group, and actually you've got nothing. So you need to build into your systems this acceptance that you try things and then you debrief on them. You kill the things that aren't working, and there's no shame in that, and you support the things that are working. And so, the things that worked for us 20 years ago, I mean, Facebook was barely a thing when we first opened, compared to what was working at the end of the 2010 to
Mm.
2019. Facebook was huge. It's gone away again now because
Yeah.
algorithms have changed. So, like from our marketing point of view, we constantly have to change things.
Yeah.
It's a continual cycle of updating, but you have to apply that to everything.
Yeah.
How it's, you know, I think we had a talk years ago by Brian Steele, which I thought was
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And he talked about that, unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah.
So he described it as learning to drive a car, didn't it? You start
Yeah.
off, you're unconsciously incompetent. So you're bad, you don't know how bad you are.
Mm.
Then you become consciously
Consciously
incompetent. You
incompetent.
try
Yeah.
driving it and you kind of go, oh, I'm really bad at this. And
Yeah.
then you become consciously competent, which is kind of driving. And then
Yeah.
most people finish at being unconsciously competent. So that idea, you're doing things and you're not really thinking about it because dinner's on the table or whatever. You're just driving home. And he said that the key thing about the British cycling team is they took it to another level, which was, I think he called it consciously, unconsciously competent. This idea of, yes, you're driving along, things are happening, but you develop like this little bit at the back of your brain, this auditor that is continually going, how can we do this better? Could I
Mm.
put my indicator on a little bit earlier, or could I have taken a different route? And so I suppose I'm quite disruptive sometimes at work because I'm constantly asking, how
Yeah,
could this be done better? And sometimes, quite a lot of the times, we'll try something else and it won't be as good.
yeah.
And then we have to go back to the way we were and we'll try something again. And I
And
think,
is that difficult? Does that cause challenges as well? I can imagine that,
yeah,
when it's the challenge of you being the business owner going, "I- I- how can we make this better? How can we improve?" And other people who are
mm,
just getting used to the status
yeah.
quo go, "Okay, I think I know what I'm doing now." Is that quite hard to sort of manage that change management or the
I mean,
expectation?
it's a cultural thing. I think you've got to have that built in. The culture has to be, we could be better. Just continually, we could be better. Like the corollary of that is that, people, we do something that's quite, really complicated. Everybody here does something quite complicated. And people cope with complex situations by having systems.
Mm,
So, they don't have to think about that because they've got a system for it. You don't have to think, if you're constantly changing all the systems all the time, you're going to really lower the efficiency of people and they're going to get really upset with you really quickly.
yeah.
So you have to strike a balance. The better the culture that you have, that just culture, the more experimentation you can do. But your experimentation has to be gauged to a point where, if it goes wrong, it's not going to kill the business.
Yeah.
It might lose you a few $100, but that could be a really cheap way of learning something. One of the
Mm,
things that I always say, we do something, it costs us £500. Like, great, that is a £500 lesson,
mm,
cheap at half the price.
yeah.
Um, and we go on and we learn from it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it can be disruptive. And I find that I have to really rein in that instinct for trying to do things better.
Mm,
Um, and so we've just opened this place here. I found it really stressful because I've seen, all those systems that we had before, a lot of them had to go out the window and we're developing new ones. Um, I found it really stressful because I can see 10 things that need to be fixed. And in my mind, they need to be fixed now, but
mm,
there just isn't the bandwidth for it. And I can't just, continually be trying to manage people to fix the next thing, fix the next thing. There needs to be a little bit of stability and bedding in of those.
yeah. And how do you create that personal touch as well? Because you mentioned earlier about values, and obviously a veterinary
Mm,
practice it's so much about creating that connection with the community, because the
mm,
people around need to feel that you care about them, their pets. You mentioned,
mm,
it's very clear on your website with the marketing, the wording. It's about, your pets are their family. Um,
mm.
so how have you aimed to do that in an authentic way?
I mean, you have to live your values. I think anybody who's worked at a place where they state values, but they don't live them because they don't really believe them. They're just handy values to have for that company. People aren't stupid. They smell a rat pretty quickly. And ultimately it's completely unsustainable. So you have to look inside yourself and say, what are my values? What do I believe? And those are the things that I really, truly, genuinely believe. And then when times get tough, they're the things that keep you going.
Mm,
So when you say, how do you develop that personal touch? Well, one of my values is I think medical relationships are built on trust and a relationship because there is an information asymmetry. Um, people have to, you have to build that relationship capital with them in order to do a good job. And that's what motivates me to build those relationships. You have to be out there. You have to be on the shop floor. You have to
yeah.
actually be doing the job that's in front of you there. Part of my job is also sort of leading and trying to inspire the other people around me as well. And that means spending time with them,
Mm,
sitting down, having a coffee, being genuinely interested in what they're doing. You know, if you get into veterinary medicine because you want to make money, you will fail pretty rapidly because the demands that are placed on you are greater than any amount of money that you make out of it. You just can't sustain it. You have
mm.
to genuinely believe in those values that why you want to do it. And I'd say that must, I don't know what you think, but I think that, what's the old saying? Culture eats strategy for
Yeah, for
breakfast. And
breakfast.
as the
Yeah.
owner,
Yeah.
As the owner, you've got to embody that and live that every single day. You've got to do it harder, longer,
Yeah.
faster than kind of everybody else in the place, because
Yeah.
you're that spring, that well that everybody draws that culture from. And if you're not living it, if you say customers are our most important thing, but actually the most important thing is getting off at 3 o'clock on a Friday to go to the golf course, and we'll,
Yeah.
leave, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You're going to fall down pretty
Yeah.
quickly, I
I
think.
think there was something in the Gallup bring their State of the Global Workplace report out every single year. So they just brought it out, and it talks about the impact that managers have on employees, and
Mm,
it's dramatic. I can't remember the stat, whether it's 70% is of somebody's experience is the impact of their manager.
mm,
Um, and somebody could be not liking not believe maybe in the organization's values, but if their manager is somebody that they feel believes in them, connects with them,
mm,
then that can make their engagement. It just lifts their engagement scores. So yeah,
mm,
it's hugely valuable. Same within sport,
mm,
with a captain or a director of sport. If they genuinely
mm,
care about their players and want to understand what makes them tick, it raises engagement levels and raises productivity as a result.
mm. I suppose your job as a leader. I mean, obviously, I, I was in the army, and they have this, serve to lead and all that sort of thing. So I've always believed that my function as a leader is actually to support people in what they do best, and guide them and help them, and ultimately, I think, influence them to do the things that the business needs to get done, but it needs to come from within them. So how do I kind of set it up so that it's their own decision, and they develop their own little auditor we talked about in their head for how could they do it better, and sort of, yeah, stand back a little bit. I think leaders who are obnoxious or hectoring, or they get short-term success, but
Yeah.
long-term it doesn't work. Um, I find it really interesting, the whole psychology of leadership. So, you know, I enjoy reading books about it, and
Mm.
and actually practicing it. One of the great pleasures that I have is seeing people develop. Slightly
Yeah.
corny line, but when you go out and you see somebody that's perhaps not had a great time at another practice, that you bring them in and you try and understand their psychology, find their strengths, support them in their strengths, help them to up their game with things that they feel they're perhaps not so good at as well, and you see them blossom and move on. I mean, that's fantastic,
Yeah.
and you think you've helped that person to achieve that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great feeling.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, JT.
Yeah, sorry,
I
I'm
think no,
whispering.
no. I could carry on for hours. Um, what about the future? What are your thoughts about the future? Have you got a future plan? Are you able to share it? Don't worry if you aren't. I mean,
I,
how do you see it?
well, I think I said my value is I want to generate the same opportunities that I have. So the trick, the thing that I'm trying to learn at the moment is how do you do that at a greater scale? Because obviously the greater your scale, the bigger the organization, and you kind of get dragged away from doing things, being on that shop floor. It's kind of easy to do things when you've got maybe 3 or 4 people. It's harder when there's 20, 30. It's almost impossible when there's 1,000. So I think that what they say, the natural kind of training unit, the most number of people that you can really properly manage at one point is about 7 or 8.
Hmm.
And I think that's why army platoons tend to be at that sort of size, because once you get above that, you cannot have the same contact with the people. It's just too many people to do. So then it's okay. So if we want to have 24, then I'm going to need 3 people, and I'm going to need to teach those 3 people how to do the things that I've learned over the years. And then if we want to do it for the next layer down, actually, then I'm going to have to teach those people how to teach those people. A bit of a
Mm.
pyramid scheme almost, I suppose. And so it's kind of layering the things that learning how to communicate the things that I've learned. Now I find work not, like I suppose this techniques in terms of adaptation,
Yeah.
realizing it's chaotic environment, stress management, all that sort of thing. Um, and then teaching them how to teach it as well.
Yeah.
Teaching them how to do it, and then teaching them how to. And so I would like to, my challenge is to, open another site and another site and see if we can replicate that. Until I'm
Yeah.
actually doing it, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's exciting. And then I suppose as
Yeah,
well, it's giving people the freedom, isn't it, to bring their ideas and
yeah.
their perspectives. Um,
And you
Seth,
learn, if you
yeah, yeah,
give people the freedom
yeah,
and they kind of have a basic structure on which to
yeah,
hang it, they know how to complete the feedback loop or
yeah,
the OODA loop or whatever you want to call it. They're feeding back. You'll learn, and there's this cross-pollination of ideas, and then you can spread it out to other people and they can try it. But
yeah,
what might work well over here might not work so well over here. And yeah,
yeah.
so, can't be chaos. There has to be
No,
some kind of
yeah,
organization.
yeah, yeah. You're not an
But I
anarchist.
thought, no,
No,
no, no, no,
no,
no. But that cross-fertilization of ideas and making sure that people are genuinely involved in what they're doing, and there's a
yeah,
genuine sort of progression that they can have through that structure.
yeah. No, fantastic. There's Seth Godin, the marketeer. He brought out an alternative MBA, the Alt MBA, and somebody asked him
Right.
why it isn't accredited, and he said because as soon as you accredit something, it creates a ceiling for it where you
Yeah.
can't improve it. So he loves that idea,
Yeah.
almost like open source technology, where it always changes and gets better
Yeah.
because it has the
Yeah.
impact of the input from other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But JT, thanks so much. Really appreciate you
Oh,
sharing
it's been
your
great.
thoughts.
Yeah.
As I
No
say,
problems.
could have a part two, part three as well. That'd be brilliant.
I've probably bored you enough by
No,
now.
no. There's so much we could dig into. If people want to find you, I'll obviously put the links in. But if people want to find you from a pet perspective, a business perspective, how can they connect
We're
with you?
around Banbury, Brackley,
Mhm.
closest practice to Silverstone, I guess you could say. Yeah, Taylor Vets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
pop
Oh,
in, have a cup of tea.
oh,
I love meeting people and chatting over things.
brilliant. I will put the links in and yeah, thanks again.
All right, Charlie. Take care.
You too.